Hey, welcome back to Media Snack, live from New York.
Greetings from London.
So,
Yes.
I've been pushing this one out and sharing it and saying, like, this is basically giving away all our secrets today. I mean, and we've spent over how many episodes now? It's like 220, I think this one is. 220 episodes, just basically giving you some insight into kind of things that we've learned really over the last decade of working closely with leading marketers and understanding kind of how to manage and work with agencies and the operations of agencies and all that stuff. Today, 4 questions that are just so fundamental. So we're kind of giving them all away. And these are questions that when we sit with the most senior stakeholders, sit with the CMO, this is what we tell them. So that's all coming up in today's Media Snack. Welcome to Media Snack, the live weekly show where we unpack the important questions that you will have about media, agencies, marketing, and more. If you're new to the channel, it's great to have you join us. Subscribe below to get alerts of all upcoming weekly episodes. Okay, good. So I've teased a bit there. I've probably overpromised now. We can underdeliver as usual. Let's just get straight into it. So tell me, what's the question of the week?
So what are the 4 most important pitch questions?
Yeah. And the reason that you'd be like, oh, Dave and Tom talking about pitches again. That's like every week. But these are fundamental to the relationship between an entire advertiser and the agency. They are questions which come up in a pitch, but they are so fundamental. And what's interesting for the CMO is it tells you the psychology of the agency. And once you understand the psychology of the agency, you understand the dynamic of the relationship between advertiser and agency. If you understand that and you appreciate these 4 questions as a CMO, and therefore your whole marketing org, then you're on a path to success. So they are a little bit kind of little secret peek into how we counsel CMOs. So hope you find it interesting. As usual, if you have comments, please leave them down below. We're streaming live, so we can see your comments. Anything that you want to contribute to this episode, we'd love to hear it. And we're not going to go, when we were prepping this episode, we were like, well, how are we going to keep this under like 20 minutes? So we're going to try and skip over this pretty quickly, but we're going to give you the 4 questions, which we think are the killer 4 questions, explain a little bit about the context of those. And at some point, we'll probably be able to go deeper. Or if anyone wants to go deeper on these things, just let us know, because we could go deep all day on these things. So love to hear your thoughts. Leave comments down below. It'd be really good to hear what you think. And if there are any other questions you think we've missed, but in our view, after 10 years, these are the 4 questions you need to ask. So that's important. So the reason it's important in a pitch context, just so you know, and we've talked about this quite a lot, is that agencies are becoming rightly more discerning about pitches that, the businesses that they will pitch for. Used to be, when we were on agency side many years ago, agency would be pretty well resourced and they would just go pitch everything. These days, not so. And I can already see Donna Verdica from Dentsu, who leads growth at Dentsu, who's just left a comment. We'll come to you in a second, Donna. But Donna knows this, and Donna makes decisions as her contemporaries do across the other agency groups. What they're going to pitch for. So let's just get into the questions, and then as we explore the questions, then you'll understand where this is going. So these are questions which, when we're sat with a CMO, and we share this with the most senior stakeholders, when they say, "What's it like for a pitch? What can I do?" So what is as a CEO of the company? Or a brand president, these are the most senior stakeholders. They're like, what do I need to do? What do I need to be thinking about? Okay. And this is what we tell them. We tell them that agencies are going to be asking themselves 4 questions. And if you understand those 4 questions, then you understand the answer that needs to go with those questions. And if you understand the answer to those questions, then you're really looking in the mirror and you're presenting yourself as an advertiser, as a potential client to the agency in the best possible way. And if you can do that, then people like Donna and her team and other agency leaders will be inspired to compete for your business, and they will bring the best of their resources to meet your business challenges. Okay. So these 4 fundamental questions create and trigger the motivations and behaviors on both sides. Okay.
Exactly. Yeah.
Have I built them up enough now? That's probably
I think
it's
you're
going
good
to
to
be
go.
terribly disappointing because they're very simple questions. Okay, so let's get into it. Question number one. Let's put that on screen. Question number one. Do we want to win?
Yeah.
Now, it seems simple, but that's the agency will ask themselves, do we want to win this client? Okay. And that's important because actually it speaks to as the CMO, that speaks to your reputation as a client of an agency. And not all advertisers have great reputations as clients of the agency. So that means something. It really means something. Also, the agency is really thinking about your future behaviors. They're really thinking about, is this a business which is really on a path to growth? Or is this a business which is maybe in a category on a slow decline? Or, is this a business which is really struggling and is really just going to be a cost burden to our agency? That's really important, big consideration. The agency is also going to be thinking about the status of the current pitch market. How busy are they? What else are they pitching for? Maybe they just won lots of new business. So do they really have the capability and the capacity or the appetite to really go after this? Do we really want to win this client? Their competitive conflict, if we win this company, does that cause a problem with our relationship with this other company? They'll obviously be assessing that. And finally, most importantly, probably right now, is actually it's a talent challenge. Could we staff to that business? Right.
That's
An
right.
agency might be thinking, well, we'd love to win, this giant client's business, but really, we're not going to be able to staff to that. And they have to be realistic. So that's the first question they're going to ask. And the implication for the CMO is just knowing that actually agencies might turn you down.
Yeah.
Okay. Agencies might turn you down. That's what we say to CMO. Don't assume that all agency groups are going to be falling over themselves. It doesn't matter how glamorous and famous your brands are or how big your advertising investment is.
Yeah.
Don't assume they're going to say yes. So that's the first question. Okay, I'm on the right track. Matt Burkby, thank you for your comment. He just said nice build up. So good. I know I'm drawing this out a little bit, but anyway, that's question number one. Inspiring the agency up front. Exactly right, Matt. Thank you. We can throw some of these on the screen if you want, Krista, as well. Okay, so question number two. Is this winnable? That's the second question that the agency CEO or the agency leadership is going to ask themselves. So if they've kind of decided, well, actually, we'd like to work with this brand. Is this winnable? And what they mean by that is, firstly, if they're the incumbent agency, right? Let's just say it's your client that's launched the pitch. You've got to just say, do we want to retain it? Is your first question, and can we retain this client? Okay. If you're a non-incumbent, so if you're an agency who's not currently working with that brand, their leadership's got to ask themselves, is this winnable? Can we beat that incumbent agency? And so the status of that incumbent agency is important. How strong or not is that relationship? How likely, you have to make a judgment, how likely is it the incumbent agency is going to retain this? If it seems very likely that they're just going to retain the incumbent, and it happens, and we all know there's a bunch of advertisers each year that will pitch their incumbent agency and stick with the incumbent agency every single time, but have just reduced the cost. And that's just no good for anybody. Just waste so much time for everybody's. And obviously it's a net loss for the incumbent agency usually because they end up on worse terms. So agencies now are much more discerning about that kind of stuff. Is it winnable? If it's just driving down costs in negotiations, agencies are going to go and put their resources elsewhere. If it looks like sometimes I think it's an American expression, which I'm learning, a tire kicking exercise, an advertiser wants to go and meet some agencies just to find out what's out there. It's legitimate in some respects, but for an agency CMO, agency CEO, they're going to say, I don't know if we're going to play along with that. So they want to know, is this winnable? Is this actually up for, competitive tender? Okay. So that's question number two. Very important. If they think yes, lots of comments. We're going to come back to those in a second. Thank you. If they think yes, this is winnable, then they can move to question number three. This is like a choose your own adventure book, isn't it? Okay, so you then take the path. So can we win? And remember, this is the narrative. We share this with CMOs and agents and advertiser leadership all the time. This is the story that we tell. Can we win? And what we mean by that is the agency then has to look at their own capabilities, right? So they've got to kind of look at the pitch brief, and that pitch brief has to include a clear scope of work, which really describes the resource and what the advertiser needs from the agency. So the agency leadership's got to look at that and say, okay, based on that scope of work, do we have the capabilities to win this? Can we actually service that scope? Are we organized in the right way? Are we present in the countries where this advertiser needs us to be? Do we have the skills that are listed in this scope of work? Do we perhaps have experience in their category? Because why would we pitch for something if category experience is going to be a really determining factor, and we know that we're up against some agencies who've really got deep category experience? They're going to pass, probably going to pass. So that's the third question: can we win? And what that means, we say to the CMO, you've got to write a really good scope of work, because you've got to allow the agencies to make that decision.
Yeah.
If your scope of work is vague, they're not going to be able to make that decision. Okay, and this is all about trying to get agencies to make a positive decision to participate. So if they can answer that, if they think, yeah, you know what, our capabilities can match the scope, we're going to give it a go. Then it takes to the fourth killer question, fourth and final killer question is, how do we win? That's a big one. Donna, I'm sure, will be nodding, and others who have been in that position. Inside an agency, how are we going to win this? You've got to have a strategy then to win that piece of business. And how do they know? It's because of the work that we do with the advertiser up front prior to a pitch, is to establish what we call the evaluation criteria. How are you going to make decisions on which agencies are better than others? Like, what are the criteria for evaluation, and which stakeholders, who are going to be the decision makers? And if you can communicate that to the agencies, right? We're very transparent in the way that we run these things. We try and give agencies visibility of the evaluation criteria and the framework for that, and the stakeholders that are going to be making decision. And then we give them a timing plan. And across those three things, that allows the agency to understand, okay, how do we win? Right, well, these are the 12 criteria we're going to be evaluated against. We think we can do a good job against all 12 of those. We know the emphasis is going to be more on, our digital capabilities, or our, EMEA operation, or whatever it is, whatever the focus of those criteria are, the agency can shape and mobilize their resources to meet that brief. And so being really clear then gives them a clear path to success. And if you can get multiple agencies through those 4 questions, then you create competitive tension, then you've got a proper pitch, and then you're going to see the best that the agencies can give you.
Yeah.
Okay. That is it. Okay. That is it. We're going to come on, because David's got some tips here for how to prep yourself for this. But I'd like to just pull up, we can pull up some questions. I'm going to do that. I'm going to just bring up Donna's. Thank you, Donna. Sorry, that wasn't really a question, but thank you for the nice comment. Matt's nice build up. Matt Birkby, so experienced global media director, Matt Birkby. I think you used the word inspired. Inspiring the agency group up front feels key to that first question. Exactly right. Got to position it. So, and Matt's got good experience of having done that, having run global pitches. Matt Kassendorf, who's joined us from the 4As, which is the Agency Trade Association in the US. Hi, Matt. So to add to the talent resource question, if a marketer demands to meet the agency team that will work on the business during the pitch, they need to understand the team may not be there yet, which is very true. I think these days advertisers appreciate that staffing in those early months is a journey. Good. Anything else we're going to ping up now? Let's move on to your tips, and I'll have a quick look through those. So David, just share what do we tell CMOs? How do you get ready for this, to prep agencies to ask those questions?
I think we split those questions into 2. Okay, and they're really, really important questions. And of all of the questions within that, I think probably the most important and the most critical is the first one. Do we want to win this piece of business? I mean, when we were running pitches 3 or 4 years ago, you'd send out an in-person RFI and an invite letter and an NDA, and they'd come back and they'd all say, yeah, we'll have a go at this. And then you'd whittle the the contenders down through the kind of process. The games have changed. The rules of engagement have changed unrecognizably from where we were perhaps 2 or 3 years ago. So those first two questions are absolutely critical. And the way that we help inform our marketing clients is we say, right, the first thing you need to do is you need to engage personally with the agency leaders very early on. Okay, so you need to establish some form of kind of connection. You need to engineer a way of communicating with the agencies and to share them your story, because you have to work really hard at the moment as an advertiser to get the agency's engagement. You know, their resources, their value is discretionary, and it's fairly thin. So in order to get them to really step into your pitch, to become a priority pitch, you have to inspire them, as Matt says, and you have to seduce them at the beginning. So our recommendation is you meet with the agencies as best you can, with your most senior people and their most senior people, and you tell them the most convincing strategic story that you possibly can. Try and inspire them around your pitch and around your process. Now that allows you to try and get them to think about, yes, this is a pitch that we want to win. Okay, that is absolutely critical. The is this winnable? It's around the pitch ambition. Why are you pitching? Articulate the reason why you're going to review. Is it a statutory review? What is the core underlying reason for that pitch process? The more convincing you can be in these early stages, the more the agency leaders are going to kind of lean into that kind of process. So those are the first two questions. And if you don't get beyond there, if you can't convince the agency community beyond that, then frankly, you don't really have a pitch anyway. Okay, so those are absolutely vital at the very beginning. Once you've got the agency commitment, then it becomes around the final two questions. So can we win, and how do I win? And that's all about transparency. As you said, Tom, in your build up to this point, it's about being as transparent as you possibly can. You know, can we win it? What are the components of the process that you want the agencies to illustrate their capabilities in? How are you going to phase the process to enable the very best of the agency's contribution? And how do we win is around the transparency and evaluation. Who are the key stakeholders? What is the decision-making process that the agencies are going to go through that are going to enable them to sort of showcase and hopefully kind of win? The best quote that I think we had through certainly early COVID, when we were kind of challenging the agencies to understand how best to run pitches in this crazy period of time, unprecedented period of time. And we interrogated a lot of the new business directors, and we said, how do we become a priority pitch in this chaotic pitching world? And the best quote that came back, and I think that this resonates now as much as it did perhaps a year and a half ago, said clarity is motivation. At a time of absolute confusion, at a time where the market is so congested, the greater the clarity you can provide to the agencies, whereby they can truly step into the process, the better. So clarity is motivation. And that is a headline that I think most brand leaders should be thinking about when they're approaching pitches now. So, you know, in summary, the first two questions, do we want to win it, is the most critical of all. But those first two happen actually before you probably share the RFP. The second two is around the clarity and the transparency with which you're willing to share the process and the motivations to the agency community.
Very good. Very good. As I said, we're going to try and keep this under 20 minutes. I've got like 50 seconds to kind of wrap this up, because I think that was a good benchmark. I want to bring one more question. Marissa Lutz-Tario from VF Corporation. Thank you, Marissa. It's really good to see you on the show. And sharing some insight. We've seen success in asking for a very specific plan deliverable that can be fully executed in the future if and when the agency wins a pitch, and that gives them insight into the day-to-day and deduplicates work, I should say. Yeah, very, very good point. We fully endorse that, and we try to activate the same thing. Thank you, Marissa, for the good comment. Please leave more comments as you've got thoughts on this. We're going to probably do more, because this is such a rich area. But I think we'll just wrap there, and we'll come back to this. So that's your media snack for this week. Thank you very much for watching, and we'll see you next time.
Bye for now.
Media Snack is brought to you each week by ID Comms, the award-winning growth consultancy specializing in media. We help advertisers on a life cycle to growth in 3 service areas: operations, partnerships, and optimization that transform your media investments into real company growth. Whether you're planning an agency pitch, upgrading your media organization, want to learn new best practice, or simply get better performance from your media investments, you can find out more at idcomms.com/growth.